7. The American Dream. Have you ever dreamed of riding in a car that's longer than a blue whale, with more wheels than a centipede, and more amenities than a 5-star hotel? Well, you're in luck, because it actually exists, and it's a limo called the American Dream. The American Dream is the brainchild of J. Orberg, a legendary car creator who built iconic vehicles for movies like Knight Rider and even Back to the Future. He wanted to make the ultimate limo that would impress the world with both its size and style, and boy did he succeed. The American Dream is over 100 feet long, making it the world's longest car according to Guinness World Records. It has 26 wheels, 2 engines, and a hinge in the center to help it navigate tough turns. But that's not all. It also has a helipad, a swimming pool, a hot tub, a waterbed, and a mini golf course all on board. Yeah, you read that right. You can land a helicopter on this thing, take a dip, sleep on a soft bed, and play some golf all in one limo. It was once a star of the silver screen and the red carpet, making appearances in movies and all kinds of events. But sadly, it was forgotten and left to rot in a warehouse for years on end. Luckily, 2 car lovers named Michael Deezer and Michael Manning rescued it and restored it back to its former glory. They spent about 10 years and a lot of money to fix the engines, remove all the rust, and rebuild the interior. The limo is now fully functional and can fit more than 75 people inside at once. So, if you ever want to experience the American Dream for yourself, you know where to find it. Just make sure you have enough space to park it. 6. Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing. The Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing is one of the most iconic and sought-after cars ever made. It was produced between 1954 and 1957 and featured a distinct design with upward-opening doors, a tubular chassis, and a fuel-injected engine. Only 1,400 units were made in total, making it a rare and valuable collector's item for vehicle enthusiasts. Sadly, not all of them were treated with respect. In 2018, a 300 SL Gullwing was found in a storage unit in Jacksonville, Florida, where it had been sitting for over 40 years. The car belonged to a soldier who bought it in Germany during the 1950s. He drove it for a few years before forgetting about it. The car was in bad shape when it was rediscovered. It was covered in dust and dirt, had flat tires, missing parts, and a damaged interior. It was estimated to be worth around $800,000 even in that condition, but could fetch up to $2 million if restored. The car was eventually sold at an auction to a buyer who planned to restore it to its former glory. It was a rare opportunity to own a piece of automotive history. The car was a testament to the beauty and engineering of the 300 SL Gullwing, as well as the neglect and carelessness of its past owner. 5. Ferrari F40. Imagine finding a Ferrari F40, one of the most famous supercars ever made, abandoned in a random field in Iraq. That's what happened in 2013, when a photo of a dusty F40 went viral on the internet. The F40 was built from 1987 to 1992 to mark Ferrari's 40th anniversary and to compete with the popular Porsche 959. It was the last car that Enzo Ferrari personally approved before he passed away in 1988. It had a twin turbocharged V8 engine and could reach a top speed of 201 miles per hour. Only 1,311 units were made, making it a tough find. But the viral F40 had a different fate. It belongs to the son of Saddam Hussein, who escaped Iraq during the Gulf War in 1991 and left the car behind. It was confiscated by the Iraqi government and stored in a warehouse for years before being moved to the field. The car was in terrible condition. It was covered in dirt, had flat tires, cracked windows, missing parts, and more. The Ferrari was sold to an anonymous buyer with restoration plans in mind. What's your dream car? Why do you like it so much? Let us know in the comments down below, and be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying this video so far and would like to see more. 4. The Aston Martin DB4. The DB4 is a classic sports car that was built by the British manufacturer Aston Martin from 1958 to 1963. It was the first car to reach 0 to 100 miles per hour in less than 30 seconds and had a luxurious interior. But not all DB4s were treated with the respect and care they needed. Some of them were left to rot in barns or woods for decades, eventually losing their value and beauty. One example is a 1962 Aston Martin DB4 that was abandoned inside a barn near New York for more than 30 years. The car was originally owned by the manager of a body shop who gave it to one of his employees as a gift. The employee had plans to restore the car but never actually got around to it. Instead, he parked it in a barn where it was left exposed to dust, rust, and decay. The car was later listed on eBay for $325,000 despite its poor condition. Another case is a 1960 Aston Martin DB4 that was spotted in the woods of Massachusetts after 40 years. The car was registered in 1961 and left outside the owner's home in the forest, where it was covered by leaves and dirt over time. It suffered from severe damage and deterioration but still retained some of its original features. This DB4 was sold at an auction for $374,000 in 2017. These two examples show how some Aston Martin DB4s were neglected and forgotten by their owners, who failed to appreciate their rarity. These cars could have been worth millions if they were restored and maintained properly. A restored original 1962 Aston Martin DB4 GT sold for $9.52 million in an auction back in 2021. These cars are valuable not only for their performance and style, but also for their rich history. They deserve to be preserved and cherished by collectors and enthusiasts who can fully appreciate their significance. 3. Into the Wild bus. This bus was a lonely relic of a forgotten era, abandoned in the wilderness of Alaska. It once served as a shelter for construction workers who built a road in the 1940s, but was left behind when the project was finished. For decades it stood rusting, surrounded by snow and trees, bearing witness to the changing seasons and the passage of time. Then, in 1992, a young man named Christopher McCandless stumbled upon the bus while looking for adventure. He'd given up his comfy life and traveled across the country with nothing but a backpack and a dream. He wanted to live completely off the land, to experience nature in its rawest form, and to find himself spiritually. He thought he found his paradise in the bus, which he nicknamed the Magic Bus. He wrote in his journal, "For 2 years he walked the earth. No phone, no pool, no pets, and no cigarettes. Ultimate freedom, an extremist, an aesthetic voyager whose home is the road." But his dream quickly turned into a nightmare. He realized when it was already too late that he was trapped by the unforgiving environment and that he underestimated the dangers of living in the wild. He ran out of food and soon became sick. He tried to return to civilization, but found his way blocked off by a raging river. So, Christopher wrote a desperate SOS note on the bus door, hoping that someone would rescue him. But no one came. He sadly died alone in the bus at the age of 24. His story was told in a book and a movie, which made him famous and inspired many people to follow in his ambitious footsteps. They saw him as a hero, a rebel, and a martyr. They wanted to see the bus for themselves, to pay tribute to him and feel what he felt, but some of them never made it back. They faced the same dangers that he did, some worse. The bus became a symbol of tragedy and death. Law enforcement since decided to remove it from its original location in 2020 as a public safety measure. They airlifted it by helicopter to a secure place. The bus left behind its home in the wild, where it witnessed so much joy and pain, life and death. 2. Collier Motors, the ultimate AMC graveyard. Have you ever wondered what happened to all the cars from the 1960s and 1970s? You know, the AMC ones that look like they were built by a mad scientist on a caffeine high. Well, wonder no more, because we found the ultimate AMC graveyard located in Pikeville, North Carolina. The site is called Collier Motors, and it's truly a sight to behold. Collier Motors was once a thriving dealership that exclusively sold AMC cars. AMC, or American Motors Corporation, was a company that made some of the quirkiest and innovative cars of the time, like the Gremlin, the Pacer, the Matador, and the Javelin. They were known for their bold style, their unconventional features, and low prices. They also had a loyal fan base that appreciated their distinct personality. But AMC's glory days didn't last. In 1987, the company was bought out by Chrysler, which decided to phase out the AMC brand and focus more on Jeep and Eagle. Many AMC dealerships closed down or switched brands, but not Collier Motors. The owner, Robert Collier Jr., refused to give up on the AMCs. He kept buying and selling them until his death in 2003. He also got his hands on a huge collection of AMC cars that he stored on his expansive property. Today, Collier Motors is like a museum. There are over 300 cars on display, ranging from pristine models to rusty wrecks. Some of them are rare and valuable, like a Nash Healey Le Mans Coupe, a Rambler Marlin Fastback, and a Rebel Machine muscle car. Others are more common, such as Hornets, Ambassadors, and Spirits. But they all have one thing in common: they're all AMC cars. Collier Motors is not open to the public, but you can still see the cars from the road. You can also contact the current owner, Eddie Collier, who inherited the collection from his late father. He might let you take a look at the cars, or even buy one if you're interested. But be warned, he is very attached to the cars, and he won't sell them cheap. Collier Motors is a testament to one man's passion and dedication to a brand that most people have forgotten about. It's also a treasure trove of automotive history that deserves to be preserved. If you're ever in North Carolina and you love AMC cars or just strange cars in general, you should definitely check out Collier Motors. 1. Lady Be Good. Lady Be Good was a B-2040 Liberator bomber that flew during World War II on April 4, 1943. The plane and its 9-man crew were part of the 376th Bombardment Group for the U.S. Army Air Forces, based in Libya. The main target of their first and last mission was the harbor of Naples, Italy, which they were supposed to bomb in a 2-wave attack, but things went wrong on their way back to their base. The plane lost contact with the other bombers and flew straight over its destination during a sandstorm. The crew didn't realize they overshot their base until it was already too late. They ran out of fuel and had to bail out over the Libyan desert, forcing the plane to crash land by itself. The crew managed to survive the parachute jump, but faced a harsh and unforgiving environment. They had little water, food, or equipment, and had no idea where they were or even how to get help. Ultimately, they decided to walk north, hoping to find civilization, but they only found more sand and scorching heat. One by one, they gave in to exhaustion, dehydration, and exposure. The last survivor, flight engineer Harold Ripslinger, walked about 120 miles from the crash site before he passed away. His remains were found in 1960, along with those of 7 other crew members. The 9th member, gunner Vernon Moore, was never found. The plane itself was discovered by chance in 1958 by a British oil exploration team. It was remarkably well preserved thanks to the dry desert conditions. It still had its machine guns, bombs, radio equipment, and personal belongings from the crew. It became a curiosity for visitors and scavengers until it was relocated to a Libyan Air Force base in 1994. Lady Be Good and its crew are a tragic example of the dangers and sacrifices involved with war. Their story is a testament to their courage and endurance in the face of impossible odds.
Cross-trail artifacts. In what's been called Europe's most ambitious engineering project, the London Cross-Trail came with 35 miles of new rail tunnels that run as much as 131 feet underground, connecting the city centre with the outer suburbs and Heathrow Airport. While excavating the new tunnels, archaeologists found a fascinating array of historic and ancient artifacts. Included among the older discoveries were some 68,000-year-old bison bone fragments with teeth marks on them. Museum of London curator Jackie Kiley told the BBC that experts had suspected that bison once roamed the region, but that it was incredible to find actual remains. Researchers also found a 55-million-year-old piece of amber and a partial jawbone from a woolly mammoth. a species which died out after the last ice age and which was last seen roaming Siberia in small numbers around 4,000 years ago. Experts gathered a collection of more recent artifacts, including a Tudor-era bowling ball, which was found in a boggy moat. It dates back to a time when bowling was banned among the average classes and reserved exclusively for the elite. The team also uncovered a 19th century chamber pot, which was a common household item during a time when indoor plumbing did not yet exist. According to Kiley, 17th century human remains represent the Cross Trail Project's most significant discovery. DNA testing of the bones confirmed the identity of the bacteria that caused London's first Great Plague back in 1348. World War II terror bunker. In 2023, archaeologists announced the discovery of a so-called terror bunker in China, where Japanese scientists conducted disturbing biological and chemical warfare experiments during World War II. Experts have long known about the underground chamber where prisoners were forcibly subjected to dehydration, frostbite, anthrax, and other horrifically and potentially deadly treatment, but its exact location was unconfirmed until recently. Located in northeastern China near the city of Anda, the U-shaped bunker measured 108 feet long and 67 feet wide. Infamously known as Unit 731, it contained a network of interconnected tunnels and rooms where inhumane tests were carried out. The space included laboratories, dissection rooms, and holding cells where human guinea pigs were imprisoned. The bunker was used by a notorious biological warfare unit of the Japanese Imperial Army called Unit 237. Between 1931 and the war's end in 1945, the group experimented on Chinese, Korean, Russian, and American prisoners and POWs. Victims were exposed to grenades, chemical weapons, and plague-infested fleas, spun to death inside centrifuges, injected with animal blood, zapped with X-rays, operated on without painkillers or sedatives, and held in low-pressure chambers, sometimes until their eyeballs burst. In some cases, the materials that the scientists experimented on in Unit 731 were dropped over Chinese cities. The plague-infested fleas caused illnesses that killed hundreds of thousands of civilians. As many as 12,000 people died as a result of the experiments that went on within the bunker. Ancient elephant sculpture. During the early 3rd century BC, the region encompassed by modern-day eastern India was predominantly Buddhist. It was during this time, around 2,300 years ago, that archaeologists believe a recently discovered elephant statue was carved. Found in April of 2023 in the state of Odisha, the 3-foot-tall sculpture resembles similar artifacts that have been uncovered throughout the region, but it's thought to be the oldest object of its kind ever found. In addition to the statue, archaeologists found various other ancient Buddhist relics, including temple fragments. Buddhism originated in what is now northern India during the 5th or 6th century BC. It eventually spread throughout most of the subcontinent, including into what is now Pakistan, with its influence peaking sometime during the 3rd or 2nd century BC. After that, the religion's prominence gradually decreased in the region. Buddhist practices and traditions became blended with Hinduism in some places and faded out in favor of Islam elsewhere. Today, only about 0.7% of the people who live on the Indian subcontinent are Buddhist, but the religion is widespread throughout other parts of Asia. The elephant statue is just one of several that serve as a reminder of Buddhism's roots and far-reaching influence. What's the craziest thing you've ever accidentally found? Let us know in the comments and hit subscribe while you're at it. Liquid gypsum burial. Around 1700 years ago, during the era of Roman Britain, an elite family died and were covered in a bizarre substance called liquid gypsum before they were laid to rest. Gypsum, a mineral and a key ingredient in cement and plaster, was rarely used in burials, but it wasn't unheard of. When it was used, it was poured over a deceased person's body after they were placed inside a lead or stone coffin, and it was a practice reserved for high-ranking members of society. The liquid gypsum hardened into a shell, and the coffin was buried underground like any other grave. Although the material offered some protection to the coffin's contents, it didn't preserve an individual's remains. The person's body eventually decomposed, resulting in an empty space in the shape of their remains, similar to the cavities left behind by Mount Vesuvius victims at Pompeii. Experts discovered the most recent liquid gypsum burial using a non-invasive 3D scan, which showed the outlines of 2 adults and an infant in intricate detail, capturing their burial shrouds, clothing, footwear, and accessories. Compared with other liquid gypsum imprints, the findings are unparalleled, according to researchers from the University of York who performed the scan. They believe the trio contained within the burial all died at the same time. Besides Great Britain, liquid gypsum burials have been found in North Africa and elsewhere throughout Europe, where the Roman Empire held power at various points in history. In Britain, most of these burials date back to the 3rd or 4th century. Around 50 liquid gypsum burials have been discovered in and around York, constituting the highest concentration ever found. Decapitated dozens. In a small village near the modern-day British town of Fleet Marston, at a time when the Romans ruled the region, around 40 adults were executed and buried with their heads either between their legs or at their feet. Their decapitated remains were found among the burials of 425 former residents. The discovery of the skeletons was announced in early 2022, ahead of a new high-speed rail project called HS2. In addition to the human remains, archaeologists found over 1,200 coins along with pottery, cutlery, gaming dice, and lead weights. Researchers believe that the town that once inhabited the area was a trading center. According to Live Science, the burials were found in 2 separate clusters, suggesting that a new wave of residents came to the town at some point in time. While some graves contained cremated remains, the vast majority of deceased individuals were buried with their body mostly or entirely intact. Although decapitated burials are not unheard of in ancient Roman culture, especially in Roman Britain, they're uncommon. Researchers said that the number of burials of this kind at Fleet Marston is unusually high. It appears as though the beheaded individuals were killed in a ritualistic fashion, but the exact nature and purpose of the ritual are unclear. They may have been convicts, according to archaeologist Rob Wiseman, who has found evidence to support the idea that decapitation was one of 4 main execution methods in Roman Britain. But it's impossible to know for sure, especially since experts have no way of knowing whether the bodies were beheaded before or after death, or what their causes of death were to begin with. Interestingly, the decapitated graves are no different than the burials of fully intact bodies, aside from the fact that their heads are severed. They also contain typical grave goods, and there's no signs of the beheaded individuals being alienated from society or treated any differently than anyone else, except for the fact that they may have been executed. Whether this is evidence of the Romans treating criminals with dignity or of something else has yet to be determined. A cave frozen in time. In what experts have hailed as a once-in-a-lifetime discovery, a prehistoric cave sat frozen in time along an Israeli beach for 3,300 years, since the late Bronze Age. Discovered south of Tel Aviv in 2022, the site dates back to a time when the ancient Egyptian pharaoh Ramses II ruled over what is now Israel. During Ramses' reign, which lasted from 1729 BC to 1213 BC, the Egyptians controlled a vast swath of territory spanning modern-day Sudan to Syria. Workers unexpectedly found the cave in Palmahem Beach National Park when they accidentally drilled through its roof. As soon as they realized they had stumbled upon something of possible historical significance, they called the Israel Antiquities Authority. Archaeologists were stunned to discover that the cave's contents appear to have remained untouched for thousands of years. Inside, they found a plethora of ceramic and bronze objects that are known to be associated with funeral ceremonies. The artifacts were carefully laid out with the belief that they would help the deceased during the afterlife. Included in the collection were bowls of varying sizes and depths, goblets, cooking pots, storage jars, lamps, bronze arrowheads, and more. They came from an equally diverse array of places, including modern-day Syria, Lebanon, and Cyprus. At the time of the discovery, the IAA team announced plans to analyze the insides of the vessels for traces of organic matter. In other words, they were going to see if they could figure out what the pottery once held. Centuries-old catacomb frescoes. Around 1600 years ago, during the Roman era, an elite grain official bought a catacomb tomb in Rome. He most likely held a high position within the Roman office that handled grain purchases known as the Annona. The catacomb is part of an extended labyrinth of burial sites known as St. Domitilla, which consists of more than 10 miles of tunnels that ran beneath the ancient city of Rome itself. Most of the catacombs belonged to the wealthiest members of society. In fact, only the rich could afford a burial chamber. Researchers have long known about the tombs, which were discovered around 400 years ago by an explorer named Antonio Baggio. But it wasn't until 2017 that they were able to peer past centuries worth of grime and dirt using sophisticated new technology. When they did, they found elaborate frescoes in the grain purchaser's catacomb, as well as a section of the complex called Introductio. Using lasers, the team gently chipped away at the buildup covering the frescoes to reveal the vibrant artwork. One of the images depicts a personal presentation of the dead to Christ, according to archaeologist Barbara Matze, who told Live Science that the catacombs could be considered one of the world's oldest Christian cemeteries. The pictures include a scene featuring a shepherd, as well as an image of Jesus Christ sitting atop a throne with his arm raised before two deceased individuals and their patron saints. Matze said that the scenes were from both the Old and New Testaments. Another fresco depicts the grain purchaser that the tomb likely belonged to. Even before discovering the image of the grain purchaser, also known as the baker, they knew about his existence from historical records. The fresco shows him dressed in a richly decorated tunic and standing behind a modius, which was used to measure and distribute grain. Surrounding images show various activities relating to Rome's grain trade. Amid the frescoes, the archaeologists found the remains of two coffins, one of which most likely belonged to the baker himself. It's clear, based on his placement in the fresco, that he was an important and high-ranking person, so it's only natural to think that the tomb belonged to him. According to Matze, he appeared to be very proud of his work and social level he gained. She further explained that these are just some of the frescoes that have yet to be uncovered as archaeologists continue to explore and study the catacombs. Prehistoric flutes. Around 12,000 years ago in what is now Israel, a group of people carved more than a half-dozen flutes out of animal bones at their campsite. They are some of the world's oldest known instruments, and their sounds mimic certain birds of prey. The flutes were found at a prehistoric site called Enyan Malaha. It was inhabited by the Natufians, who were the last known hunter-gatherers to live in the Levant region as humans transitioned into a more sedentary agricultural lifestyle. Enyan Mahala was first discovered during the 1950s and has been studied extensively ever since. But the flutes went unnoticed until 2022, when a team of archaeologists noticed pieces of them scattered among a pile of more than 1,100 bird bones. Researcher Lauren Davin, who led a study of the artifacts, told Live Science that the flutes are probably among the smallest prehistoric instruments ever found. They contain traces of ochre, suggesting that they were once painted red. There's also evidence that the instruments were attached to strings and worn. Only one of them was completely intact, and it measured barely 2.6 inches long. Its sounds resemble the calls of the Eurasian sparrowhawk and common kestrel, the latter of which is a member of the falcon family. According to Davin, the Natufians purposely crafted the flutes to sound like certain bird species. This shows that the culture not only had some knowledge of the instrument making and acoustics, but they were very skilled at these crafts. Davin said that the discovery of the flutes also indicates that the Natufians probably made other instruments out of materials that have long since degraded. For now, and possibly forever, the flutes remain the only known musical instruments from the prehistoric area of the Levant.
7. Pablo Escobar. About 93 miles east of Medellin, Colombia, is Puerto Triunfo. In this town lies the legendary Hacienda Nápoles. This 7.7-mile estate once belonged to the infamous, internationally known king of cocaine Pablo Escobar, but nowadays the mansion sits empty and abandoned. After Escobar's death in 1993, the property was handed over to the Colombian government, who eventually took over the land. But officials quickly realized they couldn't manage all the animals that had been transported to the property by Escobar. His collection included exotic species like giraffes, rhinoceros, hippos, birds, horses, and even elephants. And as a result, many of them were rehomed and moved to zoos. But for a while, the estate functioned as a family-friendly theme park, complete with water rides, museums, and a wildlife sanctuary. Secluded and hidden between the Caribbean Sea and the tropical forest, the property is made up of several luxury buildings. But these days, the structures are falling into ruin. The once lush gardens of Hacienda Nápoles are now home to a family of wild pigs. And if you were to step into the mansion itself, you'd see cracked white marble walls and an outdated pink and blue color scheme from the 1980s. The home's lobby leads into a massive courtyard shaded by palm trees, although a large drained pool now overshadows this once beautiful area. Hacienda Nápoles wasn't Escobar's only home, but it was definitely his favorite, since it was outfitted with every amenity someone could ever dream of having. And the mansion's main entrance truly showcased the drug lord's ultimate pride and joy, a replica Piper PA-18 Super Cub plane. This was the small aircraft Escobar used to transport his first shipment of cocaine to the United States, a decision that led the man down a road to great prestige and wealth. And when the estate opened up as a theme park in the 1980s, this plane stayed in its place on top of the entrance to remind visitors of the rich history Hacienda Nápoles holds. 6. Cocaine Ghost Boat. In December 2020, police officers in the Marshall Islands found their largest drug haul ever. On a small atoll in an abandoned boat, they discovered 1,430 pounds of cocaine, which at the time was estimated to have a street value worth around $80 million. It was believed that the boat drifted across the Pacific Ocean from its initial port in Latin America, possibly spending months at sea. It's not uncommon for drunks to wash up on the beaches of the remote Pacific archipelago, but this discovery, made in late 2020, set a new record by miles. According to the Marshall Islands police, the large amount of cocaine was burned shortly after it was located, except for 2 small packets of the substance, which were sent out to be tested at the US Drug Enforcement Administration. The deserted 18-foot ship was first spotted on Iluk Atoll by a local resident. The locals then tried to move the boat themselves, but they were unable to do so since it was too heavy. Then, after further investigation of the boat, they discovered the large amount of cocaine inside a hidden compartment of the vessel. While it's not clear who the drugs actually belonged to, they had to have come from a major cartel. But why the ship was left drifting alone in the water is still a mystery that'll probably never be solved. 5. Efrain Isaac Rosales. In 2014 Mexico, a team from CNN, led by senior Latin American affairs editor Rafael Romo, was given a private tour of a mansion that was once home to members of the Knights Templar Cartel. The leader of the drug gang, Servando Gomez, aka La Tuta, surprisingly started out as a humble schoolteacher before deciding to make a drastic lifestyle change. Efrain Isaac Rosales, or El Tucan, one of Gomez's right-hand men, is the actual owner of the property. But in this line of business, everything of the underdogs belongs to the head honcho, which in this case is La Tuta. The team from CNN was invited to the estate by a group of locals. When they arrived, they were greeted by 6 armed guards. These men were apparently members of a vigilante group, who at the time had recently stood up to the cartel. The Knights Templar had been wreaking havoc around the area during that time, and unfortunately they weren't only known for their drug trafficking. The group committed countless horrible acts of violence and terrorized the local population through executions, extortion, and even murder. But on January 10, 2014, the town of Antunes came together, rose up in arms, and fought back against the cartel, causing El Tucan and any other members of the group to run away from the mansion. And during their hasty escape, they left several of their weapons behind. This Mexican house would be considered an upper middle-class suburban home in any big American city. But in the town of Antunes, which is in a rural area of the state of Michoacan, it seems a lot more grandiose, especially in comparison to the adobe-style homes right next door. The mansion, at the time of the walkthrough, was being used by the vigilante group as their barracks. Some of the weapons that were left behind were even repurposed by the vigilantes to be used for good instead of evil. In the foyer of the home, there stood a modern art statue, but sitting right next to it was a Mini 14 assault rifle along with a bulletproof vest. From there, a hallway connected to a decent-sized living area outfitted with a brown leather recliner in the middle of the room. And on the nearby wall hung a giant flat-screen TV, although most of the home had been picked over by the vigilante group, giving the mansion the feeling of a house whose owners had just moved out. The place was still surprisingly clean though, considering the circumstances, with the exception of the home's bathrooms, But most of the beds weren't, and pieces of furniture and random objects were out in odd places. The property also featured a shed-like structure with white pillars and a red tile roof that covered another living area with chairs and a grill. This area led to the lawn that connected a 2-level circular pool with a divider down the middle of it. What would you buy if you had as much money as a drug lord? Let us know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the video so far. 4. Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo. The Arellano Felix organization used to be a family business, and at one time it was among some of the most powerful Mexican cartels. During the peak of their power, the family of 4 sisters and 7 brothers controlled a majority of the trafficking of marijuana, cocaine, heroin, and meth into the United States. The family also owned a large home in northwestern Mexico in Culiacan, Sinaloa, and back in 2016, the mansion was being rented out and used as a commercial space. The house had sat abandoned for years, according to the rental agent, who preferred to stay anonymous. But after the Mexican government seized the property from the criminal family, the mansion was sold, renovated, and quickly put back on the market as a rental property. The owners who bought the home initially tried to convert the 11,000 square foot estate into a school, but the proposal to do so was ultimately rejected by the Secretary of Public Education, considering the mansion's violent history. After the school idea was denied, the property was then passed on to another realtor, a man named Cesar Tamayo, who then gave the house to the new unnamed rental agent. Surprisingly, the home doesn't have any bullet holes throughout any of the walls. Instead, the mansion features a wide variety of well-lit rooms, each of which is being individually rented out at different price points. There's even more space available on the building's 2nd floor, right next to a grand spiral staircase with a view overlooking the balcony, where armed guards wielding automatic weapons once stood watch for the Arellano family. 3. Carlos Lerda. In a small chain of islands southeast of Nassau in the Exumas, there's a Bahamian island called Norman's Cay. And from 1978 to 1982, this place served as the headquarters for a drug smuggling operation under Carlos Lerda's control. Once a Colombian-German drug lord, Lerda was the co-founder of the Medellin Cartel, along with the infamous Pablo Escobar. Lerda used Norman's Cay as a shipment base for smuggling drugs like cocaine into the States. The usual method of moving small shipments back then was to have the goods carried by human drug mules, either in luggage or through oral ingestion onto commercial flights. But this practice was quickly surpassed by the use of small planes which could ship entire loads of electric Kool-Aid, aka cocaine. For this purpose, an airstrip was built on the island at a length of 3,300 feet, which was long enough to accommodate Lerda's small fleet of aircraft. To protect Norman's Cay from law enforcement, attack dogs and armed guards patrolled the runway and various beaches, and radar was utilized as well. The island was a strategic rest stop for Colombian drug flights, a place where members of the cartel could refuel their planes and take a breather before continuing their trip to the US. It was also, apparently, a location known for having extravagant, lavish parties. A friend of Lerda, Carlos Toro, who worked as a Medellin cartel representative, remembered that when he landed on Norman's Cay, he would often be greeted by a car full of naked women who would welcome him to the island. He compared the island to Sodom and Gomorrah. It was full of sex, drugs, and, most importantly, no police. But the former inhabitants of Norman's Cay were fed up with the cartel's misuse of their precious island, so they made up their minds and planned to fight back against them. Unfortunately, though, their efforts were futile, and it wasn't until 1982 that the Bahamian government started to crack down on the drug smuggling operations being carried out. Lerda was eventually arrested in 1987, and afterward he was extradited to the US to finally stand trial. The former drug lord went on to serve 33 years in federal prison, but was released in 2020. Afterwards, he was deported overseas to Germany. 2. El Chapo. In late 2019, 6 houses that once belonged to drug kingpin Joaquin Guzman, who's much better known as El Chapo, were set to be auctioned off by law enforcement in Mexico. And if you didn't already know, El Chapo was once the leader of the infamous Sinaloa cartel. These houses used to serve as hideouts for the drug lord after his first escape from prison back in September 2001. But since his recapture in 2014, the Mexican government's taken control over these properties and eventually decided to put them up for auction. The homes are located in Culiacan, Sinaloa, and they have an estimated value of about 19.4 million Mexican pesos, which equates to roughly $1 million. This is all listed according to the Administration of Property and Disposal Service, SAE, which is handling the prestigious sale. The most expensive of the properties is valued at 11.2 million Mexican pesos, or a little over $500,000. This particular house was initially purchased by El Chapo for the mother of one of his children, Griselda Lopez, who was a wanted criminal in the US up until she was arrested in 2021. The three-story home featured an outdoor pool and multiple lavish bedrooms. When President Andre Manuel Lopez Obrador went into office in December 2018, he ordered the government to sell all the properties that had been seized from various tax cheats and drug dealers, 6 of which belonged to El Chapo. These days, the drug lord is serving out his life sentence in Colorado at a super maximum security prison, where he has little to no say about what happens to his once cherished estates. 1. Cartel Tigers. In Sinaloa, Mexico, a drug cartel deserted their kingpin's truck in the middle of the road back in April 2023, and inside the back of the vehicle there was some surprising cargo. It wasn't drugs, guns, or ammunition. It was a vicious Bengal tiger chained up to a post in the truck bed. The car was abandoned after a ferocious shootout between members of a cartel and an anti-drug unit. During the gunfight, most of the gang members escaped the scene on foot, leaving behind many of their firearms, automobiles, and apparently even the tiger. The lonely beast was taken to the Culiacan Zoo afterward, but it was later transported to the Ostok Animal Shelter. The majestic tiger was young, only between 11 and 12 months, and was in good health, according to staff from the Federal Attorney for Environmental Protection. The tiger's owner isn't known, but the animal wasn't aggressive and was obviously accustomed to interacting with humans on some level. Another Bengal tiger was discovered inside a trailer during January 2023. Albuquerque police found the animal inside the vehicle, which was suspected to be from another, or possibly the same, drug ring. This tiger was a juvenile, only a cub when it was found. But luckily, the tiger was given a new home at Colorado's Wild Animal Sanctuary, where the cub's rescuers lovingly gave him the name Duke. It seems that for some reason, drug cartels find owning exotic animals to be a good show of their power. Imagine a group of criminals with their own army of tigers. Now that would be terrifying. If you found an abandoned safe house stuffed full of cash and guns that was once used by a drug lord, would you turn over the discovery to the authorities, or would you take the cash for yourself and never say a word to anyone? Let us know what you would do in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to our channel. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye!